He's been at every Nuggets-Lakers game so far. Denver, younger, more athletic, more dynamic, frankly, more shot makers. Mark Medina, NBA writer, is joining us. Are you surprised that LeBron and AD have been so overwhelmed?
Yes and no. I think in some respects you could argue that the Lakers really have tapped out and kind of overachieved this season when you're looking at, the age that LeBron James has had, the inconsistency that Anthony Davis has had, as well as the role players. So this same identity got them to where they are of being, a 2-10 start, overachieving after the trade deadline because of the Russell Westbrook deal, and then scraping by into the play-in tournament. But clearly they've run into a brick wall with the Denver Nuggets. I mean, Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray have outplayed LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Their role players have outplayed the Lakers' role players. And you wonder, even if the Lakers try to put up an effort tonight to save face in Game 4 in L.A., this could be over before it even starts.
Well, Game 2, the Lakers outplayed the Nuggets for a long stretch and then couldn't make stops, and then Jokic became a facilitator in the fourth quarter. Is there part of it that the Lakers got a little bit of a break with Memphis? Their bigs were hurt. And Golden State, smallest team in the league. Wiggins didn't play for big chunks of the season. And then all of a sudden they met a real team that has their length and athleticism. And it was an odd year, but they were fortunate. They got their two playoff matchups were perfectly made for them. And This is just the reality of who they are.
No doubt external circumstances helped as far as the opponents go. The Grizzlies clearly aren't ready to be a consistently winning team. The Warriors, they were banged up. They didn't look like the Warriors that we're accustomed to seeing with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. But I think also some things have caught up to the Lakers. The attrition has caught up to LeBron James, where he's not able to be as effective as he was during the regular season, the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. Anthony Davis, he's continued that kind of on-off switch, every other game being dominant, not so much the other game. But I think what's interesting, Colin, about Anthony Davis is it hasn't been as much about him not being aggressive enough. It's the role players not covering up for some of his weaknesses, as well as, helping him move in a lot freer space because they're not hitting outside shots. D'Angelo Russell was considered a huge positive since the trade deadline with changing the dynamic of the offense prior to Russell Westbrook. He was hitting a lot of shots. In this series, he's a minus 53 on the floor. So all those things combined at once has resulted into a pretty a weird predicament where they're in with being down 0-3.
When you talk to people around the league, Rick Bucher was on earlier, I think it's more of a coaching issue with Joe Mazzulla. I've seen it. I stated this. We've seen this a lot in all sports. You elevate an assistant, they're just not ready for the moment. And Spo's arguably the best coach in the league, so it's on display, the best and the weakest. And unlike a college sport where it's one game and it dissolves into the ether, game. This mismatch is all of us, national TV. We're seeing it play out over and over. It makes Mazzulla look worse. Spoelstra look maybe like the greatest coach ever. I think you have to make a move on the coach. Mostly the roster is fine. Is that what you're hearing around the league?
I'm looking at 100% the same way you are, Colin. What's interesting is conventional wisdom in the NBA, it's always about talent at the top, health, and then coaching. But here we've seen clearly from last season what the Celtics look like with a different coach, and they're a dramatically better team. And here, while players like Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and some of the role players certainly aren't blameless to be embarrassed in such a pivotal stage in the playoffs and not bringing their A game on a consistent basis, a lot of this comes down to Joe Mazzulla's preparation and his tactics, his delay with calling timeouts, always wanting to go small instead of using someone like Robert Williams III or Grant Williams on a consistent basis. But I think what will be interesting moving forward is that as much as we've seen a lot of coaching changes these last few weeks, even for really good coaches, this is a coach that was selected by the Celtics brass with Brad Stevens. This isn't a situation where now a new ownership group has come in. They want to put their fingerprints on it. This was their guy. So do you wonder, is there some level of patience thinking, hey, he's a rookie head coach, let's see him learn? Or are they going to look at what we've seen, that clearly they're a much better team prior to his arrival?
Tatum's an interesting player. I said this. Boston's sort of a loud, obnoxious town in its politics and in its talk radio and its sports, and they love the confidence of Big Papi and KG and Bird and Brady and Gronk. They love that. They feast on it. That's not who Jayson Tatum is. He's a little bit of an odd fit in an in-your-face town. He's sort of he's not an in-your-face guy. He's very he's the prep school, the Dookie. He's got an elegant game. The other day, or maybe it was like 7 to 10 days ago, he was asked about his game, and he said, "I'm one of the best players in the world." And as he said it, I didn't even believe that he thought it was true. Like, he was embarrassed to have to say it. And I would not move off Tatum. We talked about this earlier. Is he the world's best 2 or is he a 1? Because I'm watching him juxtaposed with Jimmy Butler. He looks like a 2.
Yeah. I think that he can be both players, and I think that he's about the right things internally as far as his work ethic and player development. But at some point, when stuff hits the fan, you have to be in a position where you can carry a franchise.
Even if the coach is wrong.
Even if the coach is wrong. I mean, coaches, what often happens is they get in the way with role players. Sometimes their schemes can catch up to them, but they shouldn't get in the way of a superstar player's ability to take over a game. Sometimes it gets in the way if they're trying to rein him back in, but clearly this is not the case. That's what you saw with Jimmy Butler sometimes in his previous stops with other teams. Sometimes that just wasn't a right fit because they didn't appreciate enough of his competitiveness, and sometimes he went overboard.
Yeah.
But here, clearly with the Miami Heat, it's a perfect fit, where in Jayson Tatum's, it's almost the opposite. I mean, I think it's very telling early in the series that as Jimmy Butler's taking over the games in crunch time, Jayson Tatum is taking a step back with missed shots. And he has the potential to correct those things, but I would have expected he already would have had that in his DNA.
I don't want to talk about the finals yet. I want to throw a couple things at you.
Yeah.
Carmelo Anthony announced his retirement. I acknowledge he's a Hall of Famer. I've said this with quarterbacks. Cam Newton, people loved him. I didn't think he never had back-to-back winning seasons. He would go from great half to bad half. I thought Cam's career was more based on explosion plays than like consistent excellence. But there are quarterbacks that I like, people don't like. They're star basketball players I like more than other people. Carmelo, to me, never really truly committed to being in great shape, playing defense, but he was a shot maker and one of the best we've seen in 25 years. How do you view his career?
Well, Colin, I'll be transparent here. I'm a Syracuse guy. That's where I went to school. So I'm gonna look at things through that lens of the championship, him being one of the most dominant scorers. I think that he had the strength of a bull and grace of a swan. Yeah. He had amazing footwork, one of the best shot releases, but no doubt, I think as later on in his career, his weaknesses started to expose himself a little bit. And that clearly explains why he went, almost a year without playing in the league. Now, to his credit, he eventually was willing to adjust of taking on a lesser role and show that he can be a winning player. But it is the ultimate what if, Colin, that if he had the foresight that LeBron James and Dwayne Wade had of being very calculated with not worrying so much about what's best for your business with your contract and try to team up, how would have his career played out?
Yeah.
Some of that's circumstantial to his defense. The other part is if he adjusted his game a little bit earlier, would he have been able to have the kind of relative success that he had in Portland in his final year with the Lakers of being a star player that was showing that he was willing to take on a reduced role? But with all that said, he is one of the most dominant scorers ever in the history of the game, and props to him for that.
Here's something where I think he made a business mistake. In 1970-71, Lou Alcindor told the Bucks privately, "I want to go to Los Angeles." He did not make it public. He told the brass publicly. And very smart, knowing that they could get more in a trade, right? So the Bucks ended up, if you go back and look at what they got for him, it was a remarkable group of players and picks. He didn't make it public. Melo made it totally public he wanted to go to the Knicks, limiting the power and leverage in negotiations by New York. They had to give up too much to get him. And then he arrives in New York, and he's this beautiful chandelier in an empty mansion.
Yeah.
And it goes to show, if you are unhappy wherever you are, strategically work behind the scenes. When LeBron came out with a letter, it caught us all off guard. We thought he was going to stay in Miami. LeBron's always made brilliant business decisions. KD and Melo are transformational talent. They've been clunky in the strategy part of their game.
Yeah.
And I think, so when he left Denver, because he was at the time, that was an ascending franchise, he just made it too damn public. I not only want out, I want to go to New York. Well, then the Knicks are like, you're killing us here. We can't. You have to. And Denver, by the way, to their credit, knows, well, you gave the Nuggets front office all the power.
Yeah.
And the Knicks, you punctured all of their power.
Well, look, Colin, even you're looking at these trades 10 years ago, it would seem impossible in the social media age for things to work out nicely the way it did with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But I think the larger point that you had is on the head, that with him going to New York, they had to sell the farm to get there, and all of a sudden it's just him. And to his credit, he did a great job given the circumstances, but he also didn't do himself any favors with his part in not having enough roster balance around him. Same thing when the Knicks traded to Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City loved him, but they just figured, hey, he's too much of a cap number here, especially with the fact they have Russell Westbrook and Paul George. And so it was one of those things he could have adjusted a little bit earlier. He did save face with then signing those veteran minimum deals with Portland and the Lakers. But no doubt, the ultimate what his career would look like if he was a little bit more proactive earlier in his career with those business decisions you talked about.
Okay, so you covered the Warriors. You've been a national guy. You've covered the Warriors. So I have to ask one Warriors question. It's easy to say get rid of Jordan Poole, but Curry takes nights off and he's aging. When he's off the floor, they need a shot maker at his position. Clay's not the same player he was 3 years ago. They're very heavy in backcourt talent. They have one wing scorer, Wiggins, and no front court scoring. They're not going to sit there on their hands. Everything's based on Steph Curry's timeline. So they could move a Kuminga, but then, they need more talented wings. If you had to guess the move the Warriors make, it's going to be on Steph's timeline. They're not going for draft picks. They want guys. I think they need scoring in the front court. Karl Anthony Towns feels a little squirrely for their taste. Remember, they got D'Angelo Russell and moved him out. It didn't work.
Yeah.
But 17, 18 a game, when they had Bogut, any front court scoring, you're going to have to go through Jokic. You got to have somebody. Is there a guess on your part?
It's hard. I know philosophically they're clearly, when the season ended, leaning on, you know what, for all the strengths and recent awards, we're going to continue to lean in on building around Steph, Clay, and Draymond. This idea of investing in the young players, we didn't feel that we got enough of that this season. And so I don't think that they're going to just trade Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga or any combination of it just for the sake of it. It will have to be the right deal, but I think that's clearly where they're going to go. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to extend Klay Thompson right away. He has a year left on his contract.
Right.
Draymond Green, assuming he opts out of his player option, I think that they'll re-sign him, maybe not at the dollar figure that he wants, but clearly they're leaning in on them because they've shown through those championship runs, they know that they can at least get some things out of them, including last year, where with the young guys, it didn't feel like they got what they expected. I don't know what that deal looks like, though. Clearly, I think that they need some more backcourt help for Steph, for Clay, because Clay is not the same player as he was pre-injuries. But I don't know what market there is going to be for Jordan Poole, considering the strengths and weaknesses we've seen of him this season.
Well, I think they're going to have to go through the West and Jokic.
Yeah.
So you've got to have some length. They're very small. Sometimes you realize that you may have a window. They were small ball, and then all of a sudden a big team and a long team comes into the league, and they're younger than you, and you have to adjust. I think they got to get bigger. I think the small ball thing served its purpose, but if Denver's around, Porter's long, Jokic long, Gordon long, hell, KCP for a guard is long. They're a bad matchup for the Warriors. I was talking to a scout about this. He's like, this was when the playoffs started. I said, what do you think Warriors Denver? He like, that's not good for the Warriors. That's not a good matchup for the Warriors. They're a bad road team. Try winning in Denver.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Colin, is this is kind of explains why they got James Wiseman a few years ago in the draft to have that kind of size. His injuries and the fact that they didn't feel that he was ready with the minutes that he was given made them think, let's just pivot. We'll lean on Draymond at the 5, Kevon Looney, and while they're certainly serviceable players, to your point, they can only absorb so much. I mean, Draymond can do everything on the court, but he can't do everything at once. Kevon Looney, huge fan of him, but at some point it's law of diminishing returns when you're just giving so many minutes to a role player. So, yeah, a lot of tough choices they have to do, and we'll see if even Bob Myers is there to make them.
Great seeing you, buddy. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.